In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky comparing Vladimir Putin's Russia to Hitler's Nazi Germany. He says he's introducing a bill to change Ukraine's official Victory Day holiday to May 8th so that it does not coincide with Russia's May 9th Victory Day celebration on Tuesday, marking the defeat, of course, of Germany in 1945. Rehearsals for Moscow's annual parade currently underway, as you can see here. CNN's Clare Sebastian live in London. Claire, Victory Day, an opportunity for Russia to show off its military might. Can we expect the same this year? And does it reflect, I guess, the reality on the ground in Ukraine?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It significantly glosses over, of course, Christine, the reality on the ground in Ukraine. Look, on the one hand, Victory Day this year will be somewhat scaled back in Russia. Several regions have announced, particularly the ones closest to Ukraine, that they are either cancelling or scaling back parades, things like fireworks display, many of them citing security concerns. But on the one hand, we will be seeing Russia try to put out its top military capabilities, and all while we're seeing significant losses of equipment on the ground. We know that sanctions are hurting their ability to produce more quick enough, and we found evidence that this means that Russia is having to dip so far back into its historical stockpiles that it's bringing out 80-year-old tanks onto the battlefield. Take a look.
What a missile will do is it'll fly over the tank, then down and then 90 degrees straight into the top of the turret, which is less well defended.
This scenario has played out hundreds of times over the past 14 months. Ukraine using Western weapons to devastating effect. Russia, according to one recent estimate, has lost up to half its operational tank fleet in this war. Now Western officials say Russia's dusting off much older models to replace them.
This gun was used on the Su-100 tank destroyer in 1944, so it's a Second World War gun.
Including the T-55, first built in the 1940s. This one now housed at the Imperial War Museum outside Cambridge. Satellite imagery from a storage facility in Russia's Far East showing dozens of tanks have been removed in the last year. This image showing the T-55 at that same facility. Video that first surfaced in March also showing a trainload on the move, reportedly somewhere in Russia. The Russian Ministry of Defense hasn't confirmed their deployment, but in recent weeks, well-connected Russian bloggers have begun showing T-55s in Russian-occupied territory in Ukraine.
There's so many of these were manufactured, over 100,000 altogether, and the parts, the basic mechanical parts are all interchangeable. So there will be vast stockpiles of these.
The T-55 was a central piece of the Soviet Union's Cold War arsenal, helping crush democratic uprisings in Eastern Europe. Hungary in 1956, the Prague Spring 12 years later. But by the time Iraq used them in the Gulf War in the early 90s,
we took out, all told, 14 T-55 tanks.
They were already outclassed by US M1 Abrams and British Challengers. Earlier versions of the tanks NATO countries are now supplying to Ukraine.
I think faced with Western weapons, the Russians must expect very heavy casualties if they expect to move forward using that type of system.
Experts say behind the official propaganda, Russia cannot build new weapons quick enough. The Western sanctions primarily targeting Russia's access to higher tech parts for weapons have made it much harder for them to manufacture more modern equipment. Older, simpler tanks like this, thousands of them just sitting in storage, provide an alternative. But this against, say, a Leopard 2 or a Challenger, what happens?
If it's a one-on-one tank engagement over a reasonable distance, this will lose every time. But in wooded or closer built environments, this is adequate.
It's also simpler to maintain and train on than newer systems, an advantage for Russia's mobilized troops.
Dig a pit, sit the tank in the pit so you can only see the turret, and then that can be used to defend the front line against a counterattack.
Russia is now digging in with everything it has, as Ukraine gets ready for what may be its biggest counteroffensive yet. So look, it's clear that Ukraine in many ways has the quality edge here with the Western weapons, the NATO standard weapons that it's being supplied, in particular those tanks. Russia, though, may be able to bring the quantity to bear, and that could be significant on the battlefield, particularly as it goes into defensive mode if Ukraine launches this counter-offensive. But I think what this really shows, Christine, is Russia's commitment to keep this going, to bring everything it can possibly get its hands on, to keep this attrition-style war, keep it going, essentially.